those new to the Race Exchange, it's a platform for Arlington County employees to come and have honest and open conversations about race, learn, and be empowered in their own respective racial equity journeys. For today, we have some special guests that are going to be sharing their experiences in racial equity work. They're leaders in racial equity in their departments and throughout the county. We also ask our viewers to please use the chat and question and answer feature in Teams because we'll be taking some questions from the audience as well. So without further ado, I'll have our panel introduce themselves. Please start with your name, the department you're representing, and how your lived experiences have contributed to your racial equity journey.
So my name is Tara Palacios. I work in Arlington Economic Development, and I am the director of BizLaunch, where we work with all small businesses. And regarding my lived experiences, I would say that being an African-American woman and being in the skin that I have, I live every day as an other or someone different. And so I really try to see others for who they are, not just what they represent. And so that makes me feel like I can move forward being positive and treating everyone the way I want to be treated.
Thank you. Good morning. Good morning. My name is Wayne Vincent. My current role, I'm the Deputy Chief of Police for the Community Engagement Division. I've been with the county about 27 years. My lived experience is kind of a two-way path. I immigrated to the United States when I was about 5 or 6 years old with my parents. We grew up in an urban environment in New York City, like my friend next to me. Anita, my friend next to me, and during that time, I saw different facets of discrimination throughout my life. But on the other path, I saw mentors that looked like me in positions of leadership in law enforcement, and that kind of brought those two paths together, where I felt I wanted to contribute to law enforcement, to my community, this community, and to the profession. And so that's why racial equity is so important to me.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Anita Friedman. I'm the director of Arlington County's Department of Human Services. And as Wayne said, I'm a native New Yorker. How did I get there? Well, my parents were German Jewish immigrants who fled Germany during the Holocaust, and they had their citizenship stripped from them and all their assets and family members who perished. So when they got to the U.S. and New York, of course, being a very urban environment, they basically instilled in me a sense that you're lucky, you survived, you have privilege, now you need to do something with that and give back, and instilled in me a sense of social justice. So that's what I've been trying to do in our Department of Human Services.
Thank you. That's beautiful. And thank you all for sharing a little bit about yourselves. That's part of the point of this discussion, is to learn a little bit more about each other, connect, and also share some of the great things that Arlington County has been doing since the adoption of the racial equity resolution in September. So we'll just get right into the questions. Our first question is a two-part question. So we'd like to hear about the successes you've had integrating racial equity in your departments, particularly in the areas of employment, service delivery, procurement and contracting, and community engagement. And the second part of that question, I'll give it to you now, but I can also repeat it, is do you think that centering race leads to successful outcomes? So whoever wants to take it.
Well, I'll just jump in and say, in our department, we intersect with health, education, the criminal legal system, housing. So there is no way that we cannot address race and center race, which is why we changed our vision, mission, values to center race, because all the systems we work in, we see that outcomes for people who are BIPOC are typically worse in the areas in which we work. And we have an obligation, being a system ourselves, and also intersecting with the other systems, to do something about it and analyze how we are working and what we can improve. And so we have been doing this SWOT analysis, the same thing that Bird Guest instructed us on, with our leadership team and with our divisions, so that we can break down. You really have to break it down, right? You can't just talk about it in generalities. You got to break it down. What are we doing in employment? What are we doing in service delivery? How does it look? Who's being impacted? Who's being left out? You know, you got to have those conversations to know how to make changes, right?
Wow. Well, I'll just say from my perspective, I would tell you DHS is, they have moved forward above what the police department is right now. We're still at taking baby steps because these are hard
steps are okay.
They are. These are hard conversations to have. And I've always found that when you start these conversations, it's always good to start small, even a one-on-one. And then they expand. They can expand if you challenge people. You know, can we go to 2? Can we eventually go to 4 or even a unit where you can have these difficult and challenging conversations? But I appreciate having worked with Anita and her team in DHS. There are so many examples of how they are tackling racial equity. So I appreciate the work they're doing.
Thank you.
And I look forward to continue to work with them.
And I think for me, from your first question about lived experience and being an African American woman and being in a field of economic development, I would go to meetings, I would go to events, and there wouldn't be anyone else like me there. And many times I didn't feel welcome when I would go out. And so I made it my own purpose that as I rose up in the division, that I wanted to assure that there were more people like me that were participating, that entrepreneurs can look any different shape, size, color, background. If you have the dream of being able to start a business, we will help you with that process. And I think because of my lived experience, I was so much determined to create programming. And as I go out into public, being a public person, I wanted to ensure that we were engaging everyone. And so we've created programming where everyone is welcome. We reach people where they are, and we ensure that they feel as if they're part of something and they're not an outsider, which I think if you're deliberate, and I want to throw deliberate and being deliberation when you're doing work in the public sector, I think that's extremely important, and you can't forget it, because that's why you're like, well, why are we getting all the same usual suspects? Right. Well, it's because you have to be deliberate, and this has to be at the front of your mind each and every day. I don't think we can rest on our laurels, especially today.
But you know what I've always noticed with BizLaunch, which I have always admired, Tara, is that you are able to work with these small businesses. A lot of them are immigrant-owned.
Yes.
They come to the United States. They have been entrepreneurs maybe in their home countries. They don't know how to manage working in this environment. And you really partner with them and move them along. And that is such a gift, really, to
because I think the one thing that I think about is if I went to another country and I didn't speak that language, I would never even think of starting a business because of all the regulations and the policies. So I try to put myself in their shoes. And many times they've been taken advantage of, like people have stolen their identity or they've taken their money. And so we try to build that trust in government so that they can feel comfortable coming to us. But it's a empathy as well.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, leading the community engagement division, and we have a business outreach section. And part of that is, reaching out and working with all of our businesses. But I'll tell you, our small business owners are a large part of that, because like you both said, sometimes they don't have, or they don't even know the resources. No. They don't even know what AED is some points, as you know. They don't. They really don't. Isn't that amazing?
They're leasing acronyms out at them.
I know. They don't even know anything. So for us, giving those county resources like your department, or even more so, even yours,
Health and Human Services,
and bringing that together is very important as far as what our business and what our community engagement division tries to do.
And I think we touch, even though we're in economic development, we touch Health and Human Services, the police department. I feel like working together, and this isn't a cliche, but really working together interdepartmentally is the way to go.
Yes.
Because we couldn't do this on our own without your support.
And I mean, community engagement is the key.
Oh, yeah.
Because, I sometimes think we have this philosophy of build it and they will come. That doesn't work anymore. No. You have to go where the people are. And especially in today's climate where people are afraid of government, they're afraid of law enforcement, they're even afraid to step foot in the Department of Human Services.
Yes.
It's not we know where people who are struggling live. We know, we have all the data. We know the zip codes, we know the neighborhoods. We need to figure out how to go to the people.
Yes.
And be there with them and establish that trust,
I'll tell you, one of our biggest challenges is when engaging with our community, all of our communities in Arlington. It's very easy, and it's almost like you can go anywhere and engage with those organizations, those large organizations, you know,
Right.
like SIDFed and things like SIDFed, NAACP. Those are, you can always, that's their job. They're going to engage with us.
Right.
But like you said, going into those neighborhoods and meeting those people that maybe aren't, they're just ordinary, just residents of Arlington County, and finding them, and they're so vast.
Yes.
I'll tell you, we've done some incredible work lately with not only some of our minority communities, but also our elderly community, our special needs community.
Right.
These are people that we have to go meet them, go where they are, as you said. So important. So that's why engagement is so
100%.
important.
Yeah.
Can I just bring up something you brought up?
Yes.
Tara, you brought up something you said about you want people in your business that you're trying to help see people that look like you. How is that challenging for you? Because in law enforcement, I bump into that all the time.
Yes, it is tough.
Yeah.
It is tough. One thing that we've started to do, because we always see the same usual suspects that know how to navigate, that know how to get into the system. And I think of the current pandemic when people were getting PPP loans, but they weren't people like me.
Right.
They were people that had the ability to genuflect and jump onto stuff. And some of the systems are inherently biased, especially when it comes to access to capital.
Right.
And so what we've started to do is really go to people, meet them where they are, and to also do what we do Brunch and Businesses quarterly. And that's an event where we look at different communities, whether it's in the African American community, Asian community, LGBTQ community, and we will do a panel discussion where people in the audience can see themselves, and then other people that are allies or non-allies that just want to hear more can come and learn. Because I think there's something about representation and seeing yourself not what other people see you, but as the leader that you are. Because these small business owners are leaders in our community, and a lot of them give back.
Right.
And so how do we support them and let them be seen? I think that's really important.
You know, I'm going to just touch upon that a little bit. And Anita, I really want to hear from you because I know you have. We all have the same struggles as
Yes.
far as recruitment,
Right.
And
gosh.
diversity within our respective agencies.
Right.
And so like you, and I was our HR director many years ago, but they've certainly got a lot better since I've been there. But one thing that we did years ago that I believe we still do today is, again, looking at those communities within our agency and having them go out,
Yes.
you know, whether it be LGBTQ+, whether it be women in law enforcement
That's
that are
right.
speaking directly to their audience, because as you all know, we have to diversify
Yes.
our respective
Yeah.
departments. Because I mean, that's just, I think it's so important.
Yeah, I mean, we've done sort of, putting the, into our job announcements, encouraging and welcoming language. And we've ensured that our interview panels have diversity. And we've inserted questions into our hiring, interview questions about how would you react, how will you, engage in a diverse environment, making sure people have those skills. But we really, when looking at some of our workforce shortages, I think in some cases we're over-credentialed, Like, you have to, if we are always asking for the licensed clinical social worker or the PhD in psychology, think about it. People, that's going to be predominantly white because there's disadvantages in the system for people to get the credentials. So we have to start looking also at, are we asking too much?
Yeah.
Let's readjust who we're looking for with what we need. And because there's bias in that also, I think.
But what I love about that, and I have to give Chief Penn a shout out on this, because many years ago he put things in place, I think, directly to address that. And so for us, you're right, we're one of the few departments that require 60 college credits to be a police officer.
Right.
And you're right, that is without a doubt, it can be a barrier for keeping that diversity. Absolutely, it can be. But we can do things such as have, things that we'll look at, someone that serves our country in the military for 4 years, they can be a waiver. They can be when folks, or a waiver for if someone's prior law enforcement, they've done this job somewhere else, but they don't have the education.
Right.
And coming up soon, in the coming months, we're hoping to do a cadet program We're actually going to help
love
young
that.
people.
I love that.
Yeah, young people who actually we're going to help them go to college because we want college education. We want to give them the opportunity
Yes.
to get their college education. Excuse me. So I think there are things we can do
Yes.
to look at that as well. You know, where I think, and more importantly, also our coworkers. Don't forget, we don't want our coworkers to feel like we're just giving people a pass. It's not a pass. It's helping people find where they are. Bring
You
them
know
in.
what's interesting? I think over time, what I've noticed is the more diverse our teams are, I think a certain way, because I'm of a certain generation, we get the young people, get older people, get people of all colors together, and we come up with the best programming and with the most impact. And I think people forget about the creativity that we have when we bring diverse folks and diverse thoughts together.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. And you know, I know that you all touched a lot about some of the challenges. We heard about the barriers, we heard about access. So when you're faced with these situations and these ideas that don't move us forward, how do you challenge those ideas on race, racial equity?
Oh, that's a good question.
Well, we were talking earlier before we came on about normalizing just talking about race. And it takes a long time for people to feel comfortable just being able to say words like black, white, brown, you know, instead of code words, right?
Yes.
And really just saying, you know, racism is with us. It's in our institution. It's not made up. Look at the data. Look at the data. These are facts, right? You have to normalize that this is an issue that you can talk about in order to move forward. So I think that's sort of one of the basic things. And, you know, when you also depends how large your organization is. I have 800 people in the Department of Human Services. Just getting them to think that they're part of one department is
Group 800, yeah.
But, you know, you need to then, like, train the leaders to carry on the work, you know, and the next level and the next level, because, you know, it has to penetrate all through the department. And it's ongoing, but it's hard work.
But how do you push that forward? Because, you know, as you said, when you talk about race, it should be a challenging, it should be a difficult conversation. And I think no one can say that it's easy. It's not easy for me. It's not easy. I know it's not easy for any of us, any of you. But just specifically, what's your strategy as far as, I don't want to say forcing it, but can you force it, or should it be is normalized? I mean, naturally, or just are we forcing that issue?
I don't think we're forcing, but if you know, people don't want this to be flavor of the month.
Right, right.
A lot of things we do, you say it once, you have some kind of event, we're making progress, and it's put on the shelf.
Right. That's right.
This is something that has to be just continued to be discussed, ongoing, in whatever systems, whatever communication methods you have in your department. We have a town hall, we always discuss race. We have a Talk to Me Thursday, we always discuss race. We have division meetings, we always discuss race. You have to keep discussing it because, and people, you know, those who aren't on board, well, tough is what I say. We're doing this, and you're going to keep hearing about it.
Whether you like it or not.
Because buy-in is important.
Yeah.
I mean, it is. I mean, you're not looking to, I mean, but it is important. And for us, I think in our department, you know, people, I think, and I've seen this up front. I've seen people that are nervous to speak. They're nervous to say something that they feel they're going to be, you know, somebody's going to feel like this. Yeah, they're going to feel blackballed. They're going to feel as if someone's not going to understand what they really, truly meant.
Right.
And you know what I mean? And they're going to be embarrassed. And I guess that's what you mean by normalize. And that's why I believe in starting small and growing so people have that comfort level.
And making a safe space for people.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of clutter that we see in social media, a lot of things that are distracting. But at the end of the day, if we communicate with one another, instead of being online or like sending a chat, but really face to face, and ask people how they feel, or hey, does this make you feel uncomfortable? Why is that? Like, have some of these conversations, because I'd rather communicate and have it out there than to let it just lie and move away, because I feel like people don't have a buy-in if they're not being communicated with or not understanding like the full situation.
And you have to have, you know, we call it grace, but, you know, I'm a white person. I have stepped into things many times in my learning journey, right? and people have called me out on it. And let me say, it's painful.
Yes.
We use a process called Ouch, Oops, Educate. I don't know if you've heard of that.
I haven't heard of that.
Yeah.
Ouch.
Ouch,
Ouch.
Oops,
Oops.
Educate.
Educate. Ooh, I'm
Which
gonna
means,
use that.
and I can send you some stuff, but basically, you said something I say something that offends Wayne. He goes, ouch. And I say, oops. And then it's not Wayne's job to educate me. It's my job to educate myself
So you
about
would go
how
to
I have offended.
understand how Wayne was offended by something you
Yes,
said.
right. And then I got to do the work to understand why what I said was offensive.
I love that. I love that you're putting the burden on yourself to educate yourself
Yeah.
too, because I know that one of the issues that we have in this work is putting that undue burden on our BIPOC communities to educate us, for them to be, the onus to be on them for that. So I really
Exactly.
appreciate you clarifying
Exactly.
that the educate is on you.
Yeah, it's very, I mean, the burden on BIPOC people to even come to the conversation and the table is tremendous, you know, and because I can never know what it's like to be in your skin, you know, and I don't live it every day, you know, so it's really very heavy, and I know that in my own staff, you know, there's really sometimes an excessive burden and toll on people, and they feel exhausted, you know.
It can be exhausting.
I think also too with you know, with our BIPOC population that's doing the work, because I know for a fact sometimes they believe, and I've heard this from several people, not just in my department, but they feel as if they're blackballed. You know, they lose friendships. In some cases, some people may even say they've lost careers or goals to move forward. And so I think that's where I think our roles become very important as leaders.
Lifting up.
Yes, lift them up, support them, but also realize they know that this is coming from the top and going across. You know, that is important, because if they don't feel that support, then shame on us. You know, that shame on us.
100%.
Shame on us.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you another conversation that I find interesting when you talk about race is we talk a lot about having these conversations internally. But I quite frankly, I find myself having these conversations in our community as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
All the time.
Yes.
And I'll tell you, it is educating for me. It is incredibly uplifting, but also it's a learning experience. It's almost a lived experience, to be honest with you. The kind of conversations we have in our, as you all know, we have a very diverse and educated community.
Yes.
And they're not shy about talking to us.
No.
Have you guys experienced that at all? What's that like?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. And, you know, I think particularly I find challenging also some of the work with the commissions who represent typically a certain sector and demographic of Arlington that's whiter and wealthier a lot of times. And I feel sometimes that they're still operating in a certain Arlington way that is not a race-informed, race-centered way. And I am not sure what to do about that, but
It's worrisome. It is worrisome.
Yeah.
It's a really hard one. And I don't know in our roles exactly how do you respond to something like that when there is negativity. We did one of our events, and it was for the LGBTQ community, and we did it on social media and received a lot of negativity that came back. And I was on there thinking, I want to delete everything. But it was exhausting, because how dare you respond in this way? And then I just started ignoring it. My husband was like, just ignore it, Tara, don't pay attention to it. So I pretended I was ignoring it, and then I was on the phone. It was over the weekend. It was really hard to do. And then I started feeling like I had to go inside me, because I felt like there was a pit in my stomach, that a group of people that I admire and love and that have so much joy themselves was being persecuted because of someone else's insecurity or how they were feeling, right? And so I had to tell myself, I'm a big anime person. I'm like, I am a superhero. I will go, I'm not going to let this be negative. This just reinforces my being positive and what I outwardly show to the world because it makes me feel good. And we will combat this and have the most amazing event. And, you know, shame on them, but we're still going to have a good time and we're not going to let them take our joy away. Because I think that life is so short. Right. And if we allow this, I might get exhausted one day, but y'all, I'm going to come back 10 times stronger to fight through, because I don't know. It is exhausting. I've been thinking about this question. It is exhausting, but I'm not going to let them win. You know, you might mess with affirmative action, but there's something else that we can do. Right. And so I think if we tell ourselves these things and then have a really great support system, I think many times we don't think to reach out to others in the county, but we're all experiencing, like Anita, what you were saying about, you know, what's going on out there in this north and south, and trying to figure out, maybe if we collaborate and work together and come up with something, that might be a way so that we can work through all of this instead of try to do it alone or in our groups.
Yeah. And I love your point about kind of reaching out and how you handle being exhausted. I want to put a pin in that for a second and just switch gears to take some questions from our viewers. Oh. So whoever wants to answer the first question, we have a few. What are your suggestions for employees who want to learn from their colleagues? For those of us who might not have the same shared experience, what would you suggest?
That's a good question.
I encourage that. I think that's, when you have different lived experiences, I find that to be some of the best conversations and learning experiences you can have. And again, I think it's like Anita said, normalizing those conversations, bringing people together. I mean, just sitting here with all of you, I'm learning so much. Yeah. And when you can have people of different cultures, styles, lived experiences together, I mean, what else? I mean, that's just learning. And that's how we get better as a people, as a community, as colleagues. So I would encourage that. And it's, to me, I would almost formalize it, where I think to have those, whether it be lunches or those local talks, where it's like, hey, let's get together and let's talk about how you grew up and how you feel and tell me something I don't know.
Absolutely.
I love those conversations.
I do too.
I mean, there's a lot of material out there. You can read, you can listen to podcasts, you can go to a library session. You know, our colleague Diane Kresh has umpteen speakers who speak about racial equity or immigration or different issues. Or find a person within your workspace who you feel comfortable with, and like form a buddy, you know, where you say, hey, I'd really like to explore these issues. Could we just talk, you know, once a month? Or start small. It's always good to start small. But find someone who you feel comfortable with so you can start exploring the issues and learning.
And I also think that when you talk to somebody, really listen to them. Because I've had people come to me and they've been judgmental or say, oh, you didn't have that experience, or I was there, I didn't experience it. Yeah. And just value that person's reality and what they're going through, and just come at it from a listening mode rather than I know better than you and how you should feel, you know. So I think sometimes that makes the conversations fraught if you're not coming open-minded to listen and to really learn and to understand.
That's true, because then people are not going to be as vulnerable. They're not, going to want to share. And I also wanted to let the audience know that we have ERGs in the county too. So they have all types of events, educational opportunities, engagement across departments. So please check out the ERGs, get involved. That's a great way to kind of meet other people who maybe have different lived experiences and start that conversation. Our next question regarding race and equity, have you seen any changes within the county government? And if so, please give examples.
Yes. I mean, the county government is big, so I'm not sure. First of all, we have a chief racial equity officer that we never had before. We have a racial equity dashboard that we never had before. We have a proclamation that we never had before. So those are changes. And then within our departments, we've been discussing the respective changes. But and it's not one size fits all. No. We have very diverse departments. I mean, police does something different from human services, social workers, which does something different from business. So you really have to go with the people who you are working with and what are their realities, and how are they delivering services, what are they experiencing in the field, how does race play into that? These are like, and changing things through everyday courses of action, I think, right?
Yeah. Good answer.
I've seen a lot of change, like from when I came here.
Yeah.
And I see more deliberate activity. I've always enjoyed working for Arlington because it is so open and so inclusive. And I think we're moving towards, not that it hadn't been hard, it's been hard. But I feel like we're making inroads. And my fear is that I don't want it to be the flavor of the month. Like, I want this to continue. I want as, sustainable over time, and that this doesn't become, it becomes more than just a conversation, but it is just a modus operandi that we all do in our work, that we're judged throughout the year, and it just starts to come naturally.
Right. So institutionalized, just,
Sustainability.
Exactly.
Part of that recipe.
And I think some of the things that Anita mentioned, I think also will help keep it sustained, regardless of what changeover we have in the future. We're all not going to be here forever.
No.
But seeing some of those things in place now that the county has done, make it sustainable.
I agree. So we'll take, I think, one more question we have time for. So what advice would you give people who want to be allies in this effort, but perhaps don't want to be out front? Wayne talked about how some people are just uncomfortable saying anything out loud. Is it as simple as just going up to others and talking and asking how they're doing? Any ideas on how to start that conversation?
I think it starts with relationships. I do. I think the most challenging thing you could do is to start a conversation about race with somebody that you don't know. I mean, let's just be honest.
that's true.
And we have
That's
colleagues
true.
that we may not know. Let's just be honest. There's no way that Anita knows everyone in her large
Right.
department. And I may know every officer, but I may not know every officer. And so we all have those relationships, and I think it starts there. And I think if you can start with the one-on-ones and expand it out. I think over time you can somewhat normalize it. And there are going to be those. I think the question was that it's going to speak, say what they have to say. They say anything they want to say. Was that the?
They were more talking about some people are just uncomfortable saying it out loud. Maybe they have their thoughts and ideas, but they just don't know how to get that conversation started.
Well, I would recommend 2 resources. One is a training on allyship. If you've never taken it, it's amazing. Whitney Parnell is the woman who is the head of Service Never Sleeps. Allyship is like I think it's a 2 or 3 day training, and it really gets down to how you need to interact when you see microaggressions and things like that taking place. Another thing, for you white folks out there, if you haven't read the book Robin DiAngelo's White Fragility, that's sort of a primer in how to become aware of what your own, whiteness brings to the table, and how to engage.
Thank you. I'm glad you brought that up, because another question was actually any books or podcasts that you recommend in this work.
I would have mentioned that one.
Yeah,
What
that's a good one.
I would have mentioned,
I mean, you can start with, if you want to start the real basics, pick up a book on unconscious bias, which describes how your brain basically categorizes people and things, and you develop bias from a very young age. There's also some online tests you can do from the Harvard, I forget what that's called.
University.
Bias tests, which basically even score you on your biases towards, gender, race, there's all kinds of things. And, but there's a lot of reflection that has to be done. Understand that if you're white, you don't deal with certain things just because of the color of your skin, You don't have to worry when you go out in the street that you're going to be necessarily categorized as an other, and that is a major difference in life. And then you have to own your privilege and do something about it. So there's a lot of materials out there, right?
I would say read, educate yourself, understand if there's a culture. Just by the nature of being in the DC metro area, there's always a culture being celebrated that you can attend. There was a Native American powwow that happened at University of Maryland in the spring. And I didn't know as much, and I just learned so much, and I felt part of the community. It was an amazing experience. But being here in this area, you really can embrace different cultures and learn different people's truths, and go to Politics and Prose or to the library to different readings, because they will bring out the specialists, and a lot of it is for free. And you can use it to grow as a person as well.
If I can just speak just briefly, I'll just add that pace yourself.
Yes,
That's
very true. That's
Easily
very
become
true.
overwhelmed in racial equity. You have to pace
That's
yourself,
right.
understand your limits, know who your friends are, your allies are, but again, pace yourself, because and I'm not exhausted because I don't do the work that I know other people do that do so much more than me, and I know they're exhausted. And sometimes you have to take a break. You really do. You need to have breaks and understand for your own mental health that you need to take a break.
Being
So
mindful to that.
Yes,
Yes.
mindful. So I would say
Yes.
just pace
That's
yourself.
true.
We talk about self-care all the time, but we don't necessarily practice it enough, you know.
It's like the doctor, the doctor's the worst in diagnosing themselves, right?
Right. And that actually kind of goes into our next question, which is on sustainability. So where do you all find it most difficult to maintain that momentum to sustain people and the work over time?
I try to live my truth every day. And I try to make sure that I am making sure that when I'm putting a group together, or we're working with others, or working in teams, really looking to see what the balance is. I hear a lot when I'm working with people that, we can't get BIPOC people out. And I'm like, okay, that's a cop-out. Have you tried? We've looked everywhere. Where did you look? Oh, my usual places. Well, you ain't gonna find them there. It's like, really challenge yourself. And when you're saying you're having a hard time, I think going to Anita and Wayne's point about going to where people are and making sure, like, we've done outreach in the faith-based community. We've gone to, we were putting out signs. I took Bryna up and put out signs about things in communities so that we could let people know of programs and things. So I think in being sustainable over time, I think you have to think about it at the forefront when you're doing your work and wanting to outreach and have goals tied to it as well. And look and check and see, is it the usual suspects? Are we getting new people that are coming out? How is our work impacting? And then rinse and repeat it until you start to see that diversity happening. I don't think we will be able to rest on our laurels, because historically this has been going on for hundreds of years. So I think overnight, our criminal system is built on bias. And so we just have to own that and then say, I'm going to do my part. And you don't always have to be the loudest person. Right. As you're creating your programming, you don't have to yell and shout it, hey y'all, look what I'm doing. You just do it, because that's where the actions are, and then have some pieces in place to say, was I successful in this?
Thank you.
But that's celebrate them.
Celebrate those successes.
You have to
You need
celebrate
those
them.
wins.
You do.
Take photos, share it on social. Don't
Other
look at the
people
comments.
Fired up.
Yes.
But self-care is really important. We work in environment police also, where we're constantly facing traumatic situations, and you get traumatized. People get traumatized from that. And then you add on that, racism, which is constant, that's additional trauma. So sometimes people just need to step out of the conversation for a while and recharge. We do things like we have meditation, and we encourage people to do, the health smart activities. But this is not, this is really heavy work, and if you need a break, you got to take a break and feel okay that you can take that break,
Not feel
right?
guilty about it.
Not to feel guilty about it. We're also looking into affinity groups. We've found through OAR, Elizabeth Jones Valderrama, they do a really good job. They separate out white people and BIPOC people in some of the conversations, because it can be traumatizing when you have a mixed group and you hear sometimes inappropriate comments, right?
Yes.
And sometimes you have to just break people out so that they can feel comfortable talking about these issues separately. Of course, you don't want to do that forever because we're all one,
That's right.
department. But sometimes it's necessary.
I think when you think about law enforcement sustainability, two things come to mind for me: culture and policy. You know, and I would say, for me, culture trumps all. And so again, I think when you start from somebody who walks in the door from day one, and you get to make that's comfortable conversations, it's a part of our policies, our practices, our initiatives. I think that's where you make a big difference, and it becomes sustainable. And that comes from the top, no doubt about that.
Yeah.
So for me, that's when I think of sustainability. That's where, in my profession, that's where it comes together for us.
Have you seen a change over the last few years?
Well, I think in law enforcement, you've seen it. You've seen national changes.
Yes,
You know,
yes.
certainly there's been talks and there's been policy practices initiatives that have gone through from a national level, certainly from a state level, and here in Arlington County, we can talk about that forever. So to answer your question, yes, but we're not perfect.
That's awesome.
Yes, but we're not perfect, and we certainly have a lot more work to do. There's no doubt about that. There's certainly a lot of work to do. I've already said that, you know, we are not even close to the amount of work that Anita's team and Tara's team has done, but we're taking baby steps and moving forward.
Well, as much as we can share resources, I think that would be
Yes.
great.
Yeah.
I would love
Always.
to.
I would love for you folks to come and we could do some kind of mixed police,
Oh, that would be awesome.
AED, human services.
Count us in.
That would be fun.
Yeah, that's actually pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, to go, you know, interagency, inter-department,
we
that's actually
should.
good stuff.
Yeah.
That's why
Yeah.
we're having these conversations.
Right,
Yeah.
right. That's actually a good idea.
I love it.
Yeah.
So I guess on a personal note, how do you all personally sustain yourselves? Do you have a support group? What does support look like for you?
And there's a story behind that. I want to hear it now.
I think for me, I try to make the environment that we have a safe space. So if someone ever feels challenged or they're in a difficult situation, because we're dealing with the public, we come across people all the time. And so I want people to feel that they can articulate when they need to articulate how they're feeling, and that no matter what they say or how we interact, you know that you're in a safe space so that you can work it out. I think when we bottle things up and we keep things to ourselves, it does things inside
Yeah.
that it just kind of, and then if we don't articulate how we feel, it just comes all out in a way that we maybe didn't want it to come out.
Yep.
And so I want people to feel comfortable and to also build an environment of trust themselves so that we can have difficult conversations. Because and to me, it's not about when everything is hunky-dory and things are going good. It's when the stuff hits the fan and we all have to roll up our sleeves and we have to respond to something in a way that shows the content of our character. And so I want people to feel comfortable throughout that process and know that as leaders, they can come to us and have some of these conversations.
I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
In our department, wellness has become one of our key initiatives. It's huge for us, and Captain Drew has done a lot of incredible work to make wellness a part of our culture, because we understand how difficult and challenging not just race, but just, as you can imagine, just society, law enforcement is every day. It's heavy. It is. It's incredibly heavy. So for me, I think, not just using some of the resources that we have in our department, but also thinking on the outside too. And I'll tell you, sometimes race can be a part of that, being of those external stakeholders as well. I'll tell you one thing that I've done, and it's not even I even initiated it, but even just going to get a haircut, for example, and sitting down in your traditional black barbershop,
Right.
and they all know what I do. I don't go there in uniform, but they all know what I do. And having all of a sudden someone wants to have a conversation, and a heavy one. And I'll tell you, sometimes because I'm not in uniform, I'm off duty, I'm in a safe place because I may know probably 80% of the people in that room. No one's recording me. They just want to hear, like, straight up,
Yeah.
why did y'all do this? Or why do y'all do this? Or what would you do? And those sometimes help me. It kind of helps
Like
me
think about
sometimes
it.
too. Yeah. It's kind of, it can almost be a time for me to actually come down and just have a simple conversation with just my boys, shall we say, just to kind of talk about these challenging conversations, but not so much in uniform and formalized at work.
I love
That to me is a that to me is like a
love
comfort
that.
zone for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. My hairdresser is good too.
Yeah.
They,
The salon and the barber.
my husband doesn't even know what I talk about, but no. But I was going to say, yeah, we have to do, you know, it's really like drinking out of a fire hose. I hate to use that expression. I don't know. It's kind of, but you know, stuff is always coming at you, and you just have to sort of get into this, I don't know, this mindset that you know, it's this too shall pass.
Yes.
And then there's the next thing, and yes, this is life. Life is complex. Life is difficult, but all we can do is move forward, understand, use common sense, use judgment, use kindness.
Yes.
You know, and determination. And I also drink gin and tonics at night. That helps a lot. But
And then just still on that sustainability note and just the marathon that is racial equity work, we touched on this a little bit earlier in the conversation, but I want to hear from you three, you know, whether you've experienced this in the field or if you do have a solution or ideas that you've heard, but how do you balance putting that undue burden on our BIPOC communities of the racial equity work? So we want to center their needs and their voices, but we also don't want to put too much on them. So how have you approached that challenge?
Another very good question. I can talk personally for myself as a member of the BIPOC community. It can be exhausting, but I'm willing to try. And I don't, you know, it was interesting because we had an incident that happened at my son's elementary school, and we created these committees and they wanted them to be diverse. He's in a predominantly white school, so they wanted to have more people of color, Black people in particular, to participate. And I remember my husband, who's also BIPOC, he's like, don't do it! Don't say yes, it's going to be exhausting and you're gonna, you know. And he was right, I cried every day, you know, I was there, I was like, you know, talking and reliving some things, and they really got to the heart. But I did it because I knew that it would help other people think about my experiences differently from hearing it from me. And I took that, it was I think there's a lot of PTSD, you know, and being in my lived skin, and to be able to share that took a lot. But I was willing to do it because if it helped someone else and would prevent at least make one person at least think twice before they said or did something to hurt the next generation, I was going to do it. So I think that, are the conversations difficult, tough, exhausting? Yes, yes, yes. But if no one takes that step, not saying take the step all the time, but if we don't allow ourselves to be part of these difficult conversations, we'll never be able to move forward.
Yeah, I agree.
That's my thought.
Years ago when we first started these conversations, we took one of our officers, shall we say, and they did some training for us. It was limited. BIPOC and a white male from our department, and they got together and did the training in our department. They did not finish. They didn't finish for a lot of different reasons. But I thought that was an effective way, because people need to see, I think it was important for them to see both of them there, working together so they could relate, because both of them had different lived experiences too. And so that was the beauty of that. And so moving forward, you know, I would like to see that continue. Not necessarily those two, but just that kind of
like
collaboration, marriage, where you have people of different races working together, backgrounds. I think that is powerful. I do. I do think it's powerful when you can stand in front of a room and you can speak to your colleagues together. And so that would be my suggestion, recommendation. That's something I hope that the police department, we're moving forward to.
I love that.
we have a pretty strong staff group called REAP, Racial Equity Advancement Partners, and it's a combination. We have Black, Asian, Hispanic, Latinx, white, and we don't recruit based on race or ethnicity. It's whoever has the energy to step up and make the commitment. And if they don't, it's not obligatory. Then you can step back. But when people are in there, it's for a part of time they're expected to sort of work on something, community engagement or capacity building or something. But, I think if you create sort of a community within your department where people can take pieces of it but also feel that they're in it together, that helps sort of strengthen the effort and share the burden. I mean, certainly certain people contribute more than others, but you need a diverse group of staff who are at different places.
Agreed.
So it sounds like kind of sharing the burden, making sure that our BIPOC community is being supported with collaboration so that it's not just on them.
Right.
And it looks like we've actually gotten a few more questions from the audience. This kind of switches over to more current events. So how do you provide grace and space for employees surrounding recent racial legislation and news events? And that could be in your departments and your teams. How does that space and that grace look like for you all? Or is it just difficult to have these conversations to begin with?
Oh no, we have these conversations. It's interesting because I feel like with my team, we're such a well-oiled machine that if I didn't address it, it's almost like a sucker punch because we have different representatives from each of these different areas in my group. And so I want to have it almost, I think, no matter where you're at, whether you're winning or losing, or, we place these cliches on things, but it's mind-blowing when it happens, and if you don't discuss it, you act like it's not happening.
Exactly.
And I feel like we need to have these difficult conversations and say, it's, affirmative action. Oh my God. Women in their bodies. Oh my God. It's like, and it's like 1, 2, 3 punch. And I think stagnation, we can't allow things to just happen in a vacuum, that it helps us to think through and talk about it to see how we can help respond or create programs or things to help people that'll be negatively impacted. Like I immediately thought about affirmative action and just all the youth that won't be able to have opportunities because of someone that took advantage of those opportunities is now reaping the benefits of those opportunities. And so how do we ensure this? And you have to have the difficult conversations and say, well, how can we combat this to make this a more equal playing field? If we don't talk about it, it means it doesn't exist, right?
Right. Yeah. I think what you're saying is spot on. If you don't speak out about these issues, silence equals condoning.
Complicity, yeah.
Silence equals complicity. And I know we're in the government and, we have to remain neutral, but this is a government action that was taken.
Yes.
So it's a public policy that changed. It shouldn't be a political thing, It's not as if, you're one political team or another and you don't have an opinion, This is a public policy that has changed. We had a meeting yesterday of that REAP team and we discussed affirmative action and we discussed how there is this myth of meritocracy, like a white person and a black person starting out their career. Oh, it all goes just the same way. And whoever's, got the best scores, whatever. No, the SAT itself is a bias tool, right? And then what does that mean for the workforce, right? Who are we going to get into our workforce if we don't have a diverse representation in colleges?
Yes.
It's got a long-term ripple effect.
And I never understand why, if you provide resources and you're lifting everyone up, we all get lifted up.
Right.
And this fear factor that's out there about, it's going to be taken away from me.
Yeah.
I just don't understand that logic or thinking, because if you look at the statistics, you look at the numbers, there's enough for us all. And if we could just help and do programs that lift us all up, we have a better society.
I'll tell you, I find myself defining or helping people understand the difference between equality and equity all the time. There's a confusion there all the time.
That's
It kind of just
right.
kind of reminds me a little bit about that. You know, people think it's
100%.
it's interesting. You know, you think about that famous picture with the different boxes looking over the
Yes,
fence,
looking
and
over the fence, the
people,
baseball
yes,
field.
people have a hard time understanding that and keeping that in their forefront.
Yeah.
That's what this reminds me of.
But that's the core, you know, our founding fathers, or who, you know, said, oh, equality, one for each, but it wasn't that way.
No.
It wasn't that way, and it's still not that way.
No.
No, it's not. Well, thank you all. I think we have to wrap this up. This conversation is really good. I wish we could keep talking about it.
I just was getting started.
I know. But we really appreciate you all sharing your lived experiences, your successes, how you sustain yourself, which I think we talked about before is something that we don't really hear people talk about a lot, how exhausting the work is, how much of a marathon it is. For everyone viewing, we also challenge you to kind of think about when and how you also sustain your work and yourselves. I know sustainability looks a little bit different for everyone. So for some, it could be collaborating with a new individual or team or department to get the work done. It could look like constructive resistance, which is when you have action-oriented steps that still do push the status quo, but also invite others to collaborate and negotiate with you. We also have so many resources at the county to help you continue having these conversations about race, because that's one of the most important things, is continue to have these conversations. We have our Leading with Race online modules. We have our supplemental conversation guides. We have our DRE toolkit on equity, privilege, and bias online. And I think we're actually going to be showing a QR code on the screen where you can access these web pages and these resources whenever you need them. And if you'd like to get a little bit more involved directly, we also have, as we mentioned, we have ERGs. We have projects led by the Office of Race. So if that's something that you're interested in, please reach out to Samia Bird or Amber Barnett. We have a racial equity core team, so you're always welcome to reach out to your department equity core team member. And so there's plenty out there. Like we said today, it's just about going out there, being proactive. And again, thank you all for watching, and we hope to see you at the next Race Exchange. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.